You're not invited to dinner. Daniel Reyes had signed the mortgage transfer papers for his son's house 3 years ago with a fountain pen he'd owned since his own wedding day, and he remembered thinking, at the time, that it was the proudest 15 minutes of his life. He did not know, standing in that lawyer's office with his son Marcus grinning beside him, that he would one day sit at his kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night and cancel the automatic payment with 3 clicks of a mouse. But that was later. First, there was the phone call. "Dad, listen, it's just, Rachel's parents are going to be here, and her sister's coming with the kids, and the table only seats 10, and..." "Marcus, and it's not that we don't want you there, it's just this one's kind of a whole thing with her side, and..." "Marcus, just say it." A pause. Daniel could hear a dishwasher running in the background, the clink of plates being loaded, the ordinary sounds of a kitchen he had helped pay for. "You're not invited to dinner, Dad, not this one, I'm sorry, okay, it's just easier." Daniel stood in his own kitchen, 61 years old, holding a phone against his ear with a hand that had gone very still, and said, "Okay," in a voice that surprised him with how calm it sounded. "Don't be like that." "I'm not being like anything, I said okay." "You always do this, you get quiet and then 2 weeks later there's some whole thing about it." "There's no thing, Marcus, enjoy your dinner." He hung up first. That was new. In 34 years of being this boy's father, Daniel had never once hung up first. He didn't sleep that night, not really. He lay in the bed that had been his and Carol's for 29 years before the cancer took her, and he stared at the ceiling fan turning its slow, indifferent circles, and he thought about a Thanksgiving 14 years ago. Marcus had been 17, mouthy, half in love with a girl named Devon who didn't know he existed, and he'd come downstairs on Thanksgiving morning to find that his mother had made his favorite, the sweet potato casserole with the pecans, the one with too much brown sugar that always set Carol's smoke alarm off, and Marcus had eaten 2 full servings before anyone else even sat down, and Carol had laughed so hard she'd had to put her fork down. Daniel remembered that morning with a clarity that felt almost cruel, because it sat right next to the memory of tonight's phone call, and the two of them together made something in his chest feel like it was being slowly wrung out. He was not a man given to dramatic gestures. He had spent 31 years as a claims adjuster for a mid-sized insurance company, a job that had taught him, if nothing else, to look at a situation clearly and ask what it actually cost. He did not believe in punishing people out of spite. He believed, deeply and almost religiously, in consequences. So at 11 o'clock he got up, made a cup of decaf he didn't finish, and opened his laptop. The mortgage had been his idea in the first place, 3 years back, when Marcus and Rachel had found a house they loved in a neighborhood they couldn't quite afford on 2 teachers' salaries. Rachel taught 4th grade, Marcus taught high school biology, and Daniel, freshly retired with Carol's life insurance sitting untouched in an account that felt more like a wound than a windfall, had offered to help. Not a loan, he hadn't wanted it to feel like a loan, hanging over them, something to be nervously repaid at holiday dinners with a look of guilt. He'd set it up as a standing contribution. He paid the principal and interest on the mortgage directly to the bank, every month automatically, and Marcus and Rachel paid the taxes, the insurance, the upkeep. It was, in dollar terms, about $2,400 a month. In father terms, it had felt like something closer to love made liquid, a way of saying, "I want you to have the life your mother and I worked for, without the 20 years of struggle it took us to get it." He had never once brought it up as leverage, not when Marcus forgot his birthday 2 years running, not when Rachel's mother started getting invited to things Daniel wasn't, not even 6 months ago, when Marcus had made an offhand comment at a barbecue, "Yeah, Dad still helps out with the house stuff," in a tone that made it sound like Daniel mowed their lawn on weekends, rather than the fact that Daniel had quietly kept a roof over their heads for 3 straight years. He had let all of it go. He was good at letting things go. Carol used to say that was both his best and worst quality, that he could absorb an insult the way a stone absorbs rain, no visible mark, until one day you realized the stone had worn all the way through. Tonight, something had worn all the way through. He logged into the bank's bill pay portal, found the recurring transfer, Marcus and Rachel, Oakhurst Mortgage, $2,417.33 on the 1st of every month, for 36 consecutive months without a single missed payment. His cursor hovered over cancel, this recurring payment. He thought about calling Marcus back and just explaining how he felt, the old, sensible, adult thing to do. He thought about how many times he'd done exactly that, calmly explained his feelings, and watched Marcus's eyes glaze over the way they used to when Daniel tried to explain long division, back before Marcus decided his father's opinions were background noise, something to be nodded through on the way to doing whatever he'd already decided to do. He thought about the words this one. Not tonight isn't a great night, Dad. Not can we do something just the two of us this weekend instead. This one, like there had been others, like this was a pattern Marcus felt comfortable namming out loud for the first time, which meant it was a pattern that had existed silently for a while. He clicked cancel. A small window popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? This action cannot be undone automatically and will require manual resetup. Yes, Daniel said out loud to no one in his empty kitchen and clicked confirm. Then he went to bed and for the first time in longer than he could remember, slept straight through the night. The first sign of trouble came 19 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, in the form of a text message that read, "Hey, did something happen? The mortgage payment. Bank says it didn't go through this month. Everything okay?" Daniel looked at his phone for a long moment. He was sitting on his back porch, a cup of coffee going cold beside him, a library book about the Lewis and Clark expedition open on his knee. He had, in the 3 weeks since the phone call, developed a strange and unfamiliar peace, the kind that comes from finally putting down something heavy you didn't realize you'd been carrying for years. He typed, "I'm not paying the mortgage this month." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Wait, what? Why? Did we do some touch wrong? Daniel almost laughed at that. Did we do something wrong? As if the dinner call had happened in some other universe to some other father. He typed, deleted, typed again, and finally settled on, "Call me when you have a minute. Not an emergency, just want to talk." The phone rang 4 seconds later. "Dad, what's going on? I've got a payment due in 11 days and the bank's already flagging it as missed. That's gonna hit my credit." "I know how mortgages work, muckers. I paid one for 22 years. So why would you just, did something happen with your accounts? Are you okay? Is it money? Did something happen with your investments?" "I'm fine, my investments are fine. I have more money right now than I know what to do with, which is sort of the point." A confused silence. "Then I don't, what's the point?" Daniel set his book down. Out in the yard, a mockingbird was working through its repertoire, cycling between a car alarm and something that sounded almost like a phone ringing, and Daniel found himself grateful for the small absurdity of it, a little pocket of normal life continuing on while he had this conversation. 3 weeks ago, Daniel said, "You called and told me I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving. You called it this one, like it's a category of event I don't belong at. And I hung up and I thought about it for a long time, and I realized something." "Dad, I told you it wasn't." "Let me finish. I realized I've been paying for a house I'm not welcome inside of. That's not, I want to be careful how I say this, because I'm not trying to hurt you muckers. I want you to understand that. But I've spent 3 years making sure you and Rachel have a roof and stability, and a nice kitchen to cook Thanksgiving dinner in, and the thanks I got was a phone call telling me I'm not good enough to sit at the table in it." "That is not what I said." "It's close enough to what I heard." "So this is what punishment? You're punishing us because you got your feelings hurt." Daniel felt something in his chest tighten, but he kept his voice level, the way he used to when a claimant got angry on the phone and he had to be the calm one, the professional one, the one who didn't take the bait. "No," he said, "I'm not punishing you. I'm just done pretending that a relationship where I fund your life but don't get invited to your dinner table is a relationship at all. If I'm not family enough to eat with, I'm not family enough to subsidize. That's not cruelty, son, that's consistency." "Consistency," Muckers repeated, like the word tasted bad. "You know Rachel's going to freak out. We budgeted around this. We have 11 days. "I know, I'd start making calls if I were you." "Are you serious right now? You'd actually let us lose the house over one dinner?" And there it was, the reframe Daniel had somehow known was coming, the collapsing of 3 years of quiet, unacknowledged generosity down into one dinner, as if Daniel were the unreasonable one, as if the insult had been small and his response was the disproportionate thing. "I'm not letting you lose the house," Daniel said. "You have 11 days, 2 incomes, and I would guess the ability to talk to a bank about a short-term hardship plan, or to your in-laws, who I understand were significant enough to warrant a table reshuffling. I'm sure they'd want to help keep their daughter's house." "That's not fair." "Maybe not, but it's honest. And frankly, muckers, I think honest is what's been missing around here for a while." He hung up, second time in 3 weeks. It was getting easier. The next 11 days were, Daniel would later admit to himself, some of the hardest of his life, not because he doubted his decision, but because the silence that followed was so total it felt almost violent. No calls, no texts. Rachel, who used to send him photos of her students' art projects and funny things her fourth graders said, went quiet too, which hurt in a different, more surprising way, because he had thought, foolishly maybe, that whatever was broken between him and Muckers hadn't touched her. He kept busy. He finished the Lewis and Clark book. He started going to the Tuesday morning walking group at the rec center, a loose collection of retirees who power-walked the park loop and complained genially about their knees, and he found he liked them, liked the total absence of complicated history in those conversations, liked that nobody there needed anything from him except company. On day 8, his sister Putras called. "Muckers called me," she said without preamble. "He's upset." "I imagine he is. Daniel, he says you cut off the mortgage payment over a Thanksgiving invite." "That's a simplified version, but essentially, yes." "That seems," Putras paused, choosing her words the way she always did, carefully, like a woman diffusing something. "That seems like a lot, Danny." "Does it? He told me I wasn't welcome in a house I've paid for 3 years, straight through his mother's death, straight through a job change, straight through God knows what else without complaint, and the reaction to me stopping is that I've done something extreme." "I'm not saying he's right to have said that to you. I'm saying 2 wrongs. I'm not trying to make it right, Pat. I'm trying to make it clear. There's a difference. I gave that boy, and I do mean gave freely, no strings, help he did not have to earn and did not have to acknowledge. All I wanted in return was to matter, to be let in the door. And when he told me I wasn't, I finally believed him. I'm not punishing him. I finally believed what he told me about how he sees me, and I adjusted accordingly." There was a long quiet on the line. Then Putras said, softer, "You sound like you've thought about this a lot." "I've had nothing but time to think about it. Carol would have some things to say about all this, you know." Daniel closed his eyes. "Carol would have told me I let it go on 3 years too long." Putras didn't disagree. On day 11, the day the payment was officially considered missed by the mortgage servicer, Muckers showed up at Daniel's front door. He looked terrible, not dramatically so, but in the specific way a person looks when they haven't been sleeping and have been having the same argument with their spouse on a loop for a week and a half. He stood on the porch in a jacket that was too light for the weather, hands Jomu in his pockets, and for a moment neither of them said anything. "Can I come in?" Muckers asked finally. Daniel stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table, Daniel noted, where he'd made the decision 3 weeks earlier, and Daniel made coffee because it gave his hands something to do, and for a while the only sound was the machine gurgling through its cycle. "Rachel's furious," Muckers said eventually. "Not at you, at me. She says I should never have called it this one. Like she said it made it sound like there have been others, like it's a habit, and I told her it wasn't, but then I actually sat down and thought about it," and he stopped, rubbed his face with both hands. "There have been others, not many, but there have been." Daniel set 2 mugs down and sat across from him. "How many?" "I don't know, 3, 4 over the past couple years. Her family gets territorial, I guess, around holidays, and it was always easier to just not have the conversation with you than to have it with them. You never made a big deal out of it, so it felt like, I don't know, like it didn't matter that much to you." "It mattered every time," Daniel said quietly. "I just didn't say so. I thought that was generosity. I'm starting to think it might have been cowardice." Marcus looked up at that, surprised. "I kept thinking if I was patient enough and gave enough and never made you choose between me and anyone else, you'd eventually just want me there. On your own, not out of obligation. And instead what happened is I made it so easy to leave me out that leaving me out became the default. That's on me too, Marcus. I'm not pretending it isn't." "Then why the mortgage? Why not just tell me that? Why did it have to turn into this whole?" "Because I've told you things before, gently, for years, and they've evaporated by the next holiday. You didn't hear me until there was a number attached to it. I'm not proud of that, but I'm not going to pretend it isn't true either." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee mug slowly on the table. "We might actually lose the house, Dad. Rachel's dad offered to help, but it's not enough to cover it long term, and the bank's hardship program is a mess, and I don't." His voice cracked slightly, and Daniel watched his 34-year-old son look, for just a second, exactly like he had at 9 years old, the time he'd broken a neighbor's window and had to be the one to knock on their door and confess it. "I don't know what to do." Daniel let the silence sit for a moment before he answered, because he wanted his son to feel the actual weight of it, not have it whisked away too quickly, the way Daniel had always whisked away hard moments for him. "I'll help you keep the house," he said finally, "but not the way I was doing it. No more silent, automatic thing that you can take for granted and never have to think about. If I'm going to help pay for that roof, I'm going to sit under it sometimes. I want a standing invitation, not a maybe. I want to be introduced to Rachel's family as your father, not managed around them. And if that's ever a problem again, if I'm ever uninvited from something in that house again, the payments stop permanently, no warnings next time. I need you to understand this isn't a threat. It's just what respect is going to look like from now on, because apparently the version where I never asked for anything didn't teach you what I was worth. Marcus nodded slowly, wiping at his eyes with the heel of his hand, embarrassed and not trying to hide it. That's fair, that's fair, Dad. And Marcus, Daniel reached across the table, the way he used to when Marcus was small and scared of something, and put a hand over his son's. I don't want you to think this was ever about the money. It was never about the money. It was about needing you to understand that I am not just a monthly transfer. I'm your father. I want a seat. I don't want it because I bought it. I want it because you saved it for me. Marcus's shoulders shook once, and he didn't say anything for a while, and Daniel didn't push him to. Thanksgiving came 5 weeks later. Daniel arrived at 3:30 in the afternoon with a dish of sweet potato casserole, too much brown sugar, made from Carol's recipe card in her own handwriting, still stained at the corner from some Thanksgiving 15 years gone. Rachel met him at the door and hugged him for a long moment, longer than she needed to, and said, "I'm sorry, Daniel, truly." "We are past it," he said, and found that he mostly meant it. The table sat 12 that year. Someone had found a leaf for it that hadn't been used in years. Daniel sat between Marcus and Rachel's youngest niece, who wanted to know if he'd ever seen a real live dinosaur, and he told her gravely that he had not, but that he'd once found a fossil on a beach in Oregon that was almost as good, and she considered this an acceptable answer. When Marcus stood to say grace, he paused for a moment, looked down the table, found his father's eyes and said, "I'm grateful this year for a lot of things, but mostly I'm grateful for second chances, and for the people patient enough to give them to you even when you don't deserve it right away." Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just reached for the serving spoon, put too much brown sugar on his plate, and let himself finally all the way in.